Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to the course Environmental Impact Assessment. Today we will cover land and soil environment in our effort to understand the environmental status before we place EIA. You may note that for this module we are referring a report by United Nations Environment Programme titled Global Environment Outlook 6, Healthy Planet, Healthy People, which was published in 2019. For this session, we will particularly we'll walk through chapter 8 to understand land and soil environment. The link to the report is also provided to you. Why are we looking at the land resource in particular? We see that land as a resource is very important. You may see that initiatives related with land resource necessarily help us to achieve many 10 out of 17 Sustainable Development Goals. With the land, many concerns are connected. So, if you can think of such as food security, we get food from there, resources for energy, fuel, and also ecosystem services. One of the key and largest resource we draw from land is food. So, you look at this, the importance, significance of land as a resource. We use nearly 50% of the habitable land for the purpose of food production. Further, as we all know, land has economic value and rights to land has a lot of significance because of the development opportunities which comes along with it. And it is established there is unequal tenure of land, meaning there is uneven holding of land. If you can think of how women in your family hold land compared to men and so on. So, you can think about how there's variation of the ownership of the land in the society you see. So, also we see that there is a clear and critical role of property rights in land resource management, and also we can reflect on the role of rural inhabitants, people who live in the village, how they have an important role to conserve the land. And because of this, we are facing, this problem still exists, so we are facing problem in attaining sustainable development goals. Think if we do not have those protections, how we are going to protect land displacements by the powerful actors such as multinationals, governments. So, how if people are not protected by the land ownership, then how we are going to handle that. Also think of land resource degradation. So, there's also degradation happening. We are witnessing which is also leading to widespread migration and even conflict in many places. So, further we see that, as we all know, land has economic value and right to land has significance because of the development opportunities. There is massive deforestation with varying rates across regions. So, we see cases of deforestation as well. There is also improvement in the forest covers in many regions. People are doing forestation. We also see built up areas, like you've been seeing urban areas, all the infrastructure, what kind of constructions are coming up. They all are there which occupy land. And we see that these built up areas are relatively have lesser, they cover lesser area of land, but their impact is extensive. Its footprint is much larger than how much energy we draw, how much resources we draw for the same area. There's also concern about food waste and loss at many levels. So these are the concerns which we see when we talk about land as a resources. So therefore, the coverage will include we will look at linkages between land resource and the Sustainable Development Goals. We'll be looking at drivers and pressures on land resources. You might be seeing how we are going on looking at drivers and pressures for every individual resource we are discussing. Then we'll look at key state and trends in case of land, like what is really the scenario across the globe, and we'll also parallelly look at the Indian context. And then we'll look at key impacts of these changes. So what kind of changes are happening and how do they really impact us, and how we are using the land, and then the dynamics involved. So we'll look at the food security, human health, land management, tenure system, gender inequality, land, health, and food, and so on. So we'll be looking at all these aspects today. So the expected learning outcomes. So once you go through this, the expected learning outcomes include that you should be able to review the land as a resource and then compare it and look at the from the perspective of Sustainable Development Goals. Further, you should be able to identify different drivers and pressures which are there on the land, and you may see the complexity involved and how do we use land as a resource. Further, you should be able to list or state some of the problems and the trends in when we talk in terms of land. And furthermore, you should be able to review the impacts. You should be able to identify the impacts. You should be able to review the impacts, what is all happening with the land as a resource, and then also look at the various other things which are connected with that. So starting with looking at the linkages between land resource and the Sustainable Development Goals. Think of land, what all things it provides to us, and also think of many things which are connected with land. So think of you have been in touch, you have been seeing around, so you think about various things, what all you get from the land and what opportunities you have. So land provides us many resources and services, provides us shelter, you make your houses there, act as a property, and also gives us the cultural identity. So from a very basic needs to even the social need which we see. So land provides us food, fodder, fiber, and forest products. So all these we get from the land. We see land is closely connected with Sustainable Development Goals. So we did talk about it. So we see that it's connected, very much connected with Sustainable Development Goal 2, where we intend to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. So that's the target we are looking at, and the very specific target for this goal includes ensuring access to sufficient, healthy, and nutrition food, especially for the most vulnerable groups. So in order to achieve this, it will be very important to work on land resources to improve the conditions, improve the status of land as a resource. The main messages, if you look at from the Global Environment Outlook report, we see that one thing, major identification which we have done is identifying that climate change has become an independent driver which itself is bringing change to all the resources. So that you may keep in mind while we see many other resources as well. So furthermore, through SDG 2, we are trying to increase food productivity, which makes our process more sustainable, resilient because of the climate change. And we are also looking at improving the land quality for future generation. We are also looking at working on gender equality, and then also working with other form of inequality, and which you see is linked with SDG 10. You must we also thinking of the terrestrial biodiversity land holds. So you must have traveled a lot, you must have seen all the most of the diversity, or at least around you. So it holds a lot of terrestrial biodiversity, and so it has a lot of value because that's the richness we have. Also, you must be noticing rapid urbanization that is taking place with much larger footprint and footprint of impact which you see, or which you can conceptualize here or visualize here. You may also think of pollution on land. So what kind of pollution is happening? The garbage and waste you see around, the soil pollution you see around, the waste. Pollution of all kind, which is impacting the physical health of the land as well as our health. And then it is also influencing the functioning of the ecosystem. So land pollution is becoming an important pressure. So that's like really increasing a lot, and it's like really creating pressure. We see all these are important concerns for SDG 3 and 15. So you see land is connected with many of the SDGs which we are trying to attain. Also reflect about our activities and how much pressure we exert on the land resources. So our activities and the gain from it mostly gives us short-term gain. So when we do certain activities for our economic gains or other gains, we see that those are short-term gains. However, the impact are often long-term on the ecosystem services. So accordingly, according to the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, we see that we are living beyond our means, meaning we are consuming resources in an unsustainable rate. So we are consuming more water, more energy, more of all kind of resources which the environment offers to us. So we'll be learning about this Millennium Ecosystem Assessment later in the methods part of the course. So this was about linking with the SDG. Now, think of various drivers and pressures on land resources. So you are familiar with this, but then we'll look at what these drivers are, how they are influencing the land resource. So first one you can think of, and it's very evident and as seen in other cases too, is the population growth. Population growth is majorly causing land use change and is a threat. Land use change has major environmental impact. You think of the rate of urbanization in Asia, in African countries. We are witnessing rapid urbanization, and it's projected by the UN studies that by 2050 will be much more urbanized than any other place. The rate of urbanization ours will be the highest. So think of the potential impacts we might have on the environment because of the urbanization, and think of the footprint of the impact. So it also depends on the nature of economy we choose. The impact depends on that. So if, for example, economic drivers can be resource intensive, like if you go for manufacturing and agriculture intensive activity, then what we extract from the environment would be in massive in nature, as suggested, or it can be tertiary in nature, which are less resource oriented. So you may refer to the case of Ethiopia because of the population growth and the aligned policy of the subsidy. In northwestern Ethiopia, like 62% of the woodland conversion was witnessed into cropland. So see the range of conversion that's taking place, the land use conversion that's taking place with high environmental cost, like this dust storm, droughts, and severe soil erosion, what's happening there. So that was about the population, because the population is increasing, and then how we have to change the land to accommodate that and to meet their requirements. Another key driver of land change is urbanization. You see how much our cities are consuming in terms of water, food, and other resources. Urbanization can have both positive and negative impact on the flow of resources. How do we consume resources? So it's not necessarily be negative, but it can be positive depending on what ways we adopt to consume those resources. We also see rural to urban migration. Migration has multifaceted impacts. So on land use. So when people migrate, there's change in their diets, and then we need more infrastructure to cater to those immigrant population. We need more housing, we need more resources. So that has impact on how we decide to use our land. We also see that much of the increase in population in built up areas has taken place in disaster prone areas. So we see that people are more and more in terms of identifying places, they have moved into the disaster prone area regions, such as within moving very, very close to 10 meters above the sea level of low elevation coastal zones. So people are moving and living there for their livelihood and other sake, and they are migrating to these places. So that's another multifaceted impact which we see. So now moving on to another driver, we see that economic development also has influenced how we use the land. And due to globalization, we see increasing pressure on land systems and their functions, and because of this, there is landscape change. So the way we are using, or the way the landscape is, it's all that is changing. Also because of global trend and money flows, we see change in the land uses. So what is more encouraged, what really is being demanded by the global market, we tend to change the land use accordingly to fit the demand. So that's about the economic drivers. We see another driver, that's technology and innovation. So technology has also brought a lot of change. It's both positive and negative. Technology changed the way and the rate in which production takes place, the way we consume things. So, and because of it, the land use changes. So we are able to consume things faster, we are able to access things faster, we are able to draw things faster, we are changing the use of land, and there is change in the terrestrial ecosystem at various scales. So technology also in a positive way helps us to keep track of the environmental changes and manage our resources better, both in the urban as well as in the rural areas, such as you can think of the big data, Earth's big data, the drone, the mobile technology, that's all helping us to track and monitor what kind of environmental change is happening. It's also helping us to allow larger public participation and engagement in the process of dealing with our environment. So moving on, we see another, one of the major finding which we said is the climate change. So the another driver is climate change, and we are witnessing increase in the global temperature. We are also seeing change in the rainfall pattern. Changes may benefit some regions. So because of these changing patterns, some regions may get benefited, but much of the change in precipitation, because of the change in the precipitation, like you might have frequent droughts or frequent flood, and this because of such kind of variations, you see much influence, negative impact happens on the areas which are much more dependent, like agriculture areas are at much risk because of such kind of variations in the precipitation. And because of this, we are also already witnessing reduction in the harvest, how much yield we are gaining from the agriculture. So in the image here, you can see the impact on the harvest across the world, with higher impact shown in the blue color. In the left quadrant, in the left top quadrant, you can see the high impact on the production of maize. You can see how the impact is high in India, Australia and African countries, among many other areas. Likewise, in the right top quadrant, you can see impact on rice production, and look out for the color blue. Likewise, you can see for wheat and soy in the bottom two quadrants. So have a look at that and see how the yield is changing. Further, we see that because of the rising sea level caused by the climate change, there is major risk to the coastal areas and people living in there. Also, increase in temperature is causing growth of certain weeds and pests, which is further reducing our yield. However, there have been development in climate smart agriculture practices, such as minimum tillage and energy efficient crops and practices. Such developments provides chances for increasing the atmospheric carbon sink in the soil. So there are certain positive moves as well. Increase in carbon sink help to mitigate the impact of climate change. So that was about the drivers. So now let us go through some of the key state and trends in case of land. So we see there is change in the land use cover. So that's a very significant one. So due to climate and geological or ecological process, so that's happening. Most of the time land cover changes, but most responsible activity is agriculture. So because of agriculture, the land use, most part of the land changes because of the agriculture. Further, it's going to increase more to facilitate the growing population's need for food. So that's going to increase further. So that pressure is not going to reduce, but go on increasing. So we have a limitation to what extent we can expand, though there are land, but that would cost us the ecosystem services. Further, the economic activities at the global level is also changing the land use patterns. So just not the agriculture of it, but also the economic activities. For example, we can look at the mining we are doing to meet the global demand, and we also see reduction in the ores. So the resources are also reducing, and the scale in which we are really mining is also increasing, and mining has huge and cumulative environmental impact. Further, we see that agriculture, like we already talked, agriculture is another area for land use change. We use habitable land in range of 38 to 50% of the purpose for the purpose of food production for us and the livestock, as you can see in the image here. Now, we have also started growing crops for biofuel production. So we have started using land more and more. So you can see here how what percentage of the land surface, habitable land surface, we have been using for agriculture. There has been minor reduction in the land under agriculture. So we are seeing a certain decrease in the agricultural land, but per capita daily food supply in the world has increased considerably in past decades. So we are consuming more. Because of this, many areas have been converted to cropland. So we are using more and more of the land for crop purpose. For example, you can look at the grasslands in Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Paraguay and Uruguay, and huge land has been converted for the soybean fields, and they are mostly used for export purpose. So likewise you see in many other places here. There is increase in the global livestock population also. While human population grew, like as per the report, you see that it grew for 19%. However, the number of cattle, buffalo, goat, sheep, and all increased in much higher percentage. These increase is connected more intensive livestock production system. So we consume more of energy, we use more of land to feed these livestock. So in the graph, you can see increase in herbivorous and poultry and pigs. In the graph you can see here, and in the last one you can see the decrease in the meadows and the pasture land. So look at the steep increase and the decrease in the land here. While you see this, review this and contemplate on it. So further moving on, we see that there is change in the forest area as well. So the percentage of land under forest is getting lesser and lesser. As you can see in the graph here, so see how the forest area is declining, and you can think of these services what the forest area really provides to us. The rate of forest area differ among regions to regions, and there is some gain in the forest area due to increase in plantation. In the image you can see the changes from 1990 to 2000. Look for the loss of forest area shown in red color and forest area gain in green color. You can see that how the forestation is helping. Note the color in our country and other countries. Take note of USA as well, and Russia and Australia. So how the colors are changing there. So you can note here. In the following image, you can see the changes from 2000 to 2010. Then you keep looking at the changing colors here. In the following image, you can see the changes from 2010 to 2015 as per the study. So take a note of the color changing here and see how much forest area is changing, the red color and the green color shown here. So a loss of natural forest continues to happen in most areas of the world. If we lose these forests, we will struggle for basic essential supply. For example, in Amazon rainforest, deforestation is massive and it is causing reduction in the rainfall. And this will lead us to critical tipping point. Like we cannot really get back to the original position for the hydrological cycle in the region if the forest cover is drastically reduced. So if we further keep on reducing the forest cover, then we will reach to a point where we'll lose the hydrological cycles, the current cycle. Moving on, we further have been noticing the urban expansion. Even though built-up areas takes relatively less land, however, urban expansion and their impact is massive. We are also seeing landscape breakup, so we see a lot of fragmentation happening and then the urban sprawl happening. Cities are also taking up the agricultural land, so we are going on consuming more of the agricultural land, converting it further. Cities, because of the increased built up area, affect the hydrological cycle and the soil functions. So not only that, we are changing the land use, but we are also changing the hydrological cycle and soil function. However, we also see that cities are important because they provide us many of these services like education, housing, clean water and electricity, just because we live the way we live in cities. Moving on, we further see land degradation and crop production. Concerning with that, we see that land is deteriorating, and land degradation is connected with decline in ecosystem services. So when the land quality declines, then the ecosystem services also decline. That including the primary production, so what kind of production we are getting, that also declines. So land has been exposed to soil erosion, salinization, compaction and contamination. So you see that soil is getting eroded, there is salinization of the soil as well as there's compaction, it's getting tighter, and then there's contamination, the pollution is entering, and then there's organic matter decline, We also see forest fires and overgrazing and so on. So there's a lot of degradation which is taking place, which has other implications. We also see reduction in microbiological activity and water retention capacity. And we also see lowering hydraulic conductivity and decreasing soil resistance, among other problems here. So degradation also leads to economic and social problems, and then it is said that by improving the land, we can improve much of the services, and we can take care of ourselves by improving the land. And in the range of problems, we also see desertification. Desertification, if you look at the definition, is defined as land degradation in arid, semi-arid, and dry subhumid areas resulting from various factors, including climatic variations and human activities. So both by the variations and our activities, we see this kind of degradation in the land. And the range of desertification is happening, and the range is from 15% to 63% globally. And then there is also variations within the region where they are experiencing it. We have been also witnessing a positive trend. For example, semi-arid areas of China are now getting better. You may also refer to the World Atlas of Desertification, which provides numerous global data sets on the subject. So you can look at that as well. If we see land degradation status in India, India faces a severe problem of land degradation or soil becoming unfit for cultivation. So we are also facing those problems. Land degradation is definitely among India's most pressing environmental problems, and you can think about that we are still lot dependent on agriculture. So there's a lot of change. Many of our states have recorded an increase in the degraded land in past 15 years, with most rapid increase being noted in biodiversity-rich northeastern states. And India has committed to restore 26 million hectares by 2030. So you can see here the range of land which we are losing. Then looking into the soil salinization in the arid and semi-arid regions because of the inadequate drainage. Whenever there is inadequacy in the drainage, there is less irrigation, or there is less irrigation, salt accumulation happens in the root zone. So that's why the soil salinization happens, and this negatively affects the crop production and soil properties. In some of the countries, this problem is in large extent, large scale, and we see that it can, like as per the report, 33% of the global irrigated areas has declining productivity because of insufficient irrigation, which is causing waterlogging and salinization. So look at the scale we are talking about, 33% of the globally irrigated areas. So action has to be taken in this regard, else these losses can be very expensive to us, and there can be other impacts as well on the animal health, property values, and so on. Another issue we see is the permafrost thawing. So because of the cumulative impact, the Arctic areas is getting warmer, causing melting of sea ice. We have longer ice-free seasons now. So, and melting of ice releases greenhouse gases and alter the landscape. Melting also reduces soil and landform stability, increases erosion, and affects the Arctic habitat, albedo, and hydrology. So you see all these, the image, you can see the coastal erosion rate. Look at the erosion rate, ground ice, cliff height at different stations here. You can look at this here. Likewise, in the following image, you can see erosion threat in red, brown color here. You can see what kind of threat, erosion threats are there. We have seen state and trends. Now let us look at some of the key impacts of changes in land use and the dynamics. We can see that there's an issue about the food security. By now you have gathered that this is a direct problem connected with food security. And then And let's try to understand what food security means. People are considered secure when they always have availability of and adequate access to sufficient, safe, nutritious food to maintain a healthy and active life. So that is what we mean by food security. And there are main three critical concerns with food security, like first, food availability. It should be available. Second, one should have access to food, and third, that the food should be utilized, food utilization. So hunger and malnutrition is one of the major problem, and there's a huge number, like you look at 7 billion people are hungry and malnutritioned across the globe. And we are seeing decline in such number, but still we are facing these issues of stunted growth in Saharan African and South Asian countries. On the other hand, we also have problem of overnutrition, overweight and obese population. So this is about lifestyle choices we make, the consumption pattern, and this pressure we exert on land resources, and the kind of land use changes we make because of that. In the figure, you can see vulnerability to food security using meteorological data from 1981 to 2010 and so on. You can see here, look at the darker shades here. So look at the potential impact of climate change on the food security, and pay attention to the darker shades here. There is also need to look into the curtailing food loss with larger loss in storage and transportation. And with the why we are talking about it, because the food waste also generate greenhouse gases. Most of the waste is generated from the developed countries. Therefore, it is required to have a sustainable intensification. In graph, you can see the range of food waste here, and you look at the countries. Now, looking at the food security and food trade, we see that international trade is gaining significance to meet the global demand. There is population growth, urbanization, and shifting dietary. So our choices are changing. So that also causes changes in how we use the land. And because of the global demand, how the demand is, and many of the countries do not produce their own food, there's change in the patterns. So there can be geographic concentration of production, and this also has systemic risk, and this can lead to price hike such kind of price hike can become severe with climate change. Further, we see that there's health effects from mining. We'll be studying about these impacts more, but there are a lot of health impacts, and mining has severe impact. There are concerns of mining waste as well, and then you can also look at the Global Waste Management Outlook, which estimates mining waste to be like in the order of 20 billion ton per year, and these are of serious concerns. So mining activities has impact on ecosystems and lead to soil contamination as well. So you also look at the toxic and radioactive dust emissions, and also water pollution results from mining. So all kinds of impacts you can think of. We'll be further seeing it when we do the methods, when we'll be looking into land, how do we do the impact assessment. Looking at the waste and its human health, waste generated, like this huge waste generated by cities. People do not have access to adequate waste disposal system, which has health implications such as infections, exposure to chemicals, dust, and then also the waste generates environmental impacts, soil and water pollution, and greenhouse gas emissions. Also, millions of people are operating globally as informal recyclers. So you see the rack pickers and all. So and many of them live in and around the dumping sites. So we further see soil contamination. Soil health is important, majorly for the food security. We see that it has Soil contamination has direct health implication, and soil contamination happens because of the industrial and the commercial activity. And we see that governments in the developed countries maintain an inventory of the contaminated and remediate sites. So you can see the United States of America maintains the Superfund National Priority List, so which includes the sites contaminated. Likewise, you can see list is maintained, sites are identified by Canada as well. And then further, the soil also has human health consequences. About the health consequences are of wide range. Parasitic worms such as hookworms and so on can get transmitted from the contaminated soil. So that all needs to be taken care of. Further, we also see impact on food, chemicals, and human health. Pesticides exposures have increased. However, there are certain scientific clarity which needs to come. There's a certain level of uncertainty about which level of exposure really has impact. In 1990, the WHO estimated an annual 7 lakh cases of specific chronic effects linked with pesticides globally. So there has been regulations to control pesticides in countries. So we see other chronic pesticide exposures have the health effects of chronic pesticides exposures vary considerably on women and men. So you might have to also take care of those aspects. And there are chances of breast cancer because of the strong concentration of pesticides. Further, we see issue about land tenures, land deals. We see that there's lack of ownership of land. Even though they are dependent on land, there is lack of ownership of commonly holded land. So because of the lack of ownership, often communities lose access to land, livelihood, shelter, institutions, and food, in particular indigenous communities. In the graph here, you can see the ownership type and pay attention to small portion under indigenous people and communities. So because of the industrialization, there is increased pressure on land. This makes vulnerable communities more vulnerable without proper ownership. In the map, you can see number of land deals per country. The darker red shade indicate high land dealing. So you can see here what kind of land dealing, the scale of land dealing happening in places. Most deals are taking place by private sectors, and local involvement is less. Loss of land leads to loss. So it has multiple repercussions. Loss of investment in human capital, negative effects on the land improvement, reduced agricultural productivity, and even that influences the resilience of the community. So studies indicate the local indigenous communities successfully manage and conserve land. So that's been promoted. So you can also look at the World Resource Institute study, which emphasizes that secure land tenure can improve our and strengthen the ecosystem services. It is important to look at the local context, reinforce local governance, safeguard the rights of the indigenous people. So you can see here. So you may also find FAO voluntary guidelines on the responsible governance of tenure, so how that can be taken care of. And apart from that, land also provides socio-cultural services. Land provides variety of socio-cultural and aesthetic benefits you can think of. And if that's lost because of the land degradation, deforestation, and desertification, the values goes down, the out-migration happens, the networks, the social networks breaks up. So all these one needs to consider. And then we had talked about gender inequality, land, health, and food. So existing gender inequality may contribute to increased poverty, people displacement, resource scarcity, and other conflicts. So A lot has been done to strengthen women's ownership and participate in the land management, which will lead to household food security, dietary diversity, and children's health. So that concerns has been raised, and a lot of activities have been done in that. And it's the general idea is that women spend the money more judicially for the household. They engage more in the agricultural activity. At the same time, we see that there's less ownership. So in the image, you can see that land ownership by women, the darker red color indicate low ownership. You look at the color of our country along with others here. So you see how the women's land holding scenario is across the globe, and also pay attention to the country here. So that's all for today. So summarizing what we really covered today. So we looked at land resources and the sustainable development goals, so why it's important and how it helps us to attain sustainable development goals. We looked at the drivers and pressures on the land resources. We looked at the key state trends in case of land, as well as we looked at the impacts of changes in land use and any dynamics with changes. Here you can see the references. Our coverage has been limited as the scope of the subject. Additional resources to read and watch are provided to you in the list given here. And please feel free to ask questions. Let us know about any concerns you have, to share your opinion, experiences, and suggestions. Thank you.